Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So every single series has played at least 4 games thus far. We've had 2 teams to advance, the Florida Panthers and the New York Rangers, to the surprise of mostly no one besides maybe a couple people that picked the Tampa Bay Lightning. But we now have a full gauge on a lot of these series. So I wanted to ask you guys on Instagram to send in your hot takes. We did hot takes after game 1, which are obviously very overreactionary. It was only one goddamn game. But now we actually have some sample sizes on the series. Most of these series probably aren't going to make it past the game 5, but before a lot of these series potentially end, let's run through some of your hot takes. I have 18, whether it's team-based or player-related. We're going to run through them, and we're going to start off first with a take about the Florida Panthers and the New York Rangers. This comes to us from Bobby. He says Florida and New York being overrated as cup favorites just because they dominated bad teams in round 1, and I get the sentiment. New York, in none of their games really was like a dominant 6-1. They utterly dominated Washington, and Florida took care of Tampa Bay in 5 games outside of game 4, where Tampa finally, the floodgates opened in terms of goals. But I disagree. This is the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's not like the New York Rangers are playing the Chicago Blackhawks, the Florida Panthers playing the San Jose Sharks. Tampa is still a very talented team. The fact that Florida was able to suppress them like they did and kind of expose Tampa's defense, especially in the inner slot like they did, I think it was a good showing for the Florida Panthers. New York, Washington, definitely a worse team, but Washington's a physical team. They get in your head. So I was impressed with the New York Rangers and how they looked, considering they took care of business. Didn't really play into Tom Wilson's mind games for the most part. Matt Rempe did his job. So am I saying like, oh, the New York Rangers are the cup favorite after sweeping the only team that means something? No, but they took care of business. Sweeps in the playoffs, especially divisional teams, it's never going to be pretty. It's never going to be 5-1, 4-1, 6-2. It's not. That's not going to be the case. The other team is a solid team. Washington, you can be low on them and still say they're probably the 19th or the 20th best team in the entire NHL. They're not a bad team. They're maybe a below average team, but to win 4 straight games is still impressive in its own way, even though the level of competition maybe isn't that high. I'm not going to overreact to it, but I still think Florida and New York, based on considering they're already advanced, they would be in my top 4 in terms of cup percentages, because you look at some other teams, they're still in battles of series, but we're going to move on. Next up, this comes to us from Sonny. He said Hintz should start being accountable for doing nothing in the playoffs so far. And this was probably submitted. I started letting in these submissions like entering the 3rd period of the Dallas Stars Vegas Golden Knight game. So Hintz eventually did show up, got a massive blocked shot and the eventual empty net goal to seal it. But overall, I think he's 1,000% correct. Rupe Hintz is not getting nearly enough hate, not hate, but nearly enough criticism, probably because he plays in Dallas, which isn't like, if he played in Toronto, he'd be getting absolutely shat on. But when looking at it, a guy like Wyatt Johnson has really covered his ass on that top line. He is producing at a high level while playing with Robertson and Hintz that it has kind of masked at. But if Dallas is going to win this series against Vegas and go on a deep Stanley Cup run, I agree Rupe Hintz has to be far better than what he's looking at right now. Kings stun Edmonton. This comes to us from Chris54 Breezy. I get where the logic is in this hot take, considering in game 4, LA outshot them 33-13. It was Stuart Skinner truly stealing a game for the Edmonton Oilers that they didn't really deserve to win. But I think that was LA's best effort that we're going to see from them. That was a game that they simply had to have. And I'm not going to say Edmonton didn't try in it, but you could tell once they went up 1-0, they kind of packed it up in terms of offensively, just played some stout defensive game considering they were on the road. So I expect game 5, Edmonton to know the assignment and just come out and look like the team that they did in the first 3 games, where they were, for the most part, or the first 2, for the game 1 and game 3, they were pretty easily the better team in this series. So I think that they are going to show up and they are going to take care of business. I'd give LA like a 10% chance to pull off the upset. I just don't see it happening, especially 2 of those games. In fact, 2 of those games are in Edmonton. It's not like LA has game 5 and game 7 that they can play at the Crypto Arena. So when looking at it, I'd be shocked. That is a scorching hot take. I think Edmonton kind of just had an off night, and a night where they knew that once they went up, they could just pack it in. Next up, Petro. This comes to us from Clayton Yates. Alex Petrangelo needs to sit out in game 5. Yeah, he had a rough game number 4 for the Vegas Golden Knights, not the Dallas Stars. When looking at it, yeah, he took that pretty big penalty. I believe it was in the first period to Rupe Hintz. Again, we already talked about that they would go on to score in the power play. And I don't think that you can bench an Alex Petrangelo given his experience, especially playoff success, but he has not been nearly good enough. You look at him underlying numbers besides taking stupid penalties like that. Right now he has a 33% expected goal share at 5-on-5, 33.3% actual goal share at 5-on-5. He has not been nearly good. He has not carried his load. And when looking at it, he has been a liability when it comes to these playoff penalties in prior playoffs. The Leon Draisaitl call got himself suspended. Really dumb call in the late stages of a game. He is very prone to take these penalties. So if you're Petrangelo, you're not getting benched. I don't see that happening. Who would they have drawing? Like Alec Martinez has been their seventh defenseman for the most part. I don't foresee that happening, but I do agree if the Vegas Golden Knights are going to win this series, Petrangelo needs to really step it up. Next up, we got another comeback. Predators come back. This comes up from Caden Christie. And yeah, I think I said it on Instagram the other day. I think the Predators were the most likely team before the Lightning lost it, and I had Lightning number 2. But I think the Predators were the most likely team to potentially pull off a 3-1 series comeback, because when you look at it, they arguably could be up 3-1 right now. Game 1, they shit their pants, 7 minutes to go, let up 2 goals back to back. And again, Vancouver did a good job in terms of sustaining pressure to get those 2 goals. And then in Game 4, they're up 2 goals. They end up losing it. It was an absolute disaster. So I think Nashville, as long as they can lock in, especially considering Silovs is probably going to get Game 5 for the Vancouver Canucks, I think that they have a chance. Obviously, I'm not going to pick the Nashville Predators to pull off a 3-1 comeback, but I think they have by far the best chance, considering they've done a pretty good job at shutting down, for the most part, any of Vancouver's high danger chances. They're not really getting a ton of shots off. It's really just been JT Miller, Besser, and Quinn Hughes kind of carrying the load. They've been able to effectively shut down Elias Pettersson, who we're going to talk about later in this. So I think Nashville has arguably been the better team against the Vancouver Canucks. The Vancouver Canucks have finished more of their chances. You got to respect them for that. But I think Nashville, definitely out of the remaining teams, have by far the best chance to come back from 3-1 at this point, have the better goaltender, have been arguably better than them at 5-on-5. It's possible. It's the most likely for me. Next up, Elias Lindholm, speaking of the Vancouver Canucks, is going to show up big time with Garland and Joshua in the Canucks playoff run. Got that game winner, massive in Game 4 with that OT winner. And yeah, Garland, Joshua, Lindholm, probably the best third line in these entire playoffs. That is one of That is one of Vancouver's main differentiators in terms of elevating. And when you consider the fact that now Demko's out, DeSmith's out, they're going to need a lot of goals. You can't rely on Silovs to allow 3 goals or less every single game. They're going to have to be a high-powered offensive team. So when looking at, especially with Elias Pettersson, who we're going to talk about later, not playing that good, I think that Lindholm is going to have to be massive. You already expected him to play a pretty big role based on what you gave for him at the deadline. So with that third line, they're going to have to be massive. Now we're going to talk about Pettersson. Pettersson will never be a good playoff player. This comes to us from Marcus. I get what you're saying with this. We've seen more skilled, passive guys get exposed in these playoffs. You look at a Mitch Marner, and Pettersson isn't the most physical beast. He's not a Jack Eichel that elevates his game come playoff time. I do think we need to relax a little bit when looking at it. Pettersson can still be a good player. He's a top 15 player in terms of skill. He just needs to be a little bit more physical, in my opinion, and just have a better mindset overall. We saw when he missed that open net, he kind of looked distraught. You just got to lock in these next couple games, and I think he can be a good player. Not going to be a guy that's built for the playoffs, that elevates his game, but his skill set is so fantastic that I think as long as he gets his mental game right and not afraid to throw the body a little bit, I think he'll be a high-level playoff player going forward. And he hasn't played in the playoffs since 2020. He was not nearly the same player. It's only been 4 games. We got to relax. This isn't a Mitch Marner situation where we've seen 30 games over the last 4 years in the playoffs. Just relax. Don't think that he's ever going to elevate his play in the playoffs. Might be a little bit lower, but still can be a very effective player. Zach Hyman, this comes to us from Case Connor. Hyman might break the goal record entirely because of McDavid. That's fair. Hyman obviously had 6 goals in his team's first 4 games. I believe the record is 19. I'll flash it on the screen right now. In the 21st century as a whole, only Ovechkin and Crosby have hit the 15-goal mark. Last year, Draisaitl hit 13 in only 12 games. They got eliminated in the goddamn second round. Marchessault also hit 13 goals. I wouldn't bet on this happening, but I think it's definitely possible. They might have to actually, for this to happen, they probably have to go to 7 games at the LA Kings, so it might not be a good thing. But I think Zach Hyman, if I were to put an over-under at his goal total in these playoffs, I don't think it's ridiculous at this point to set it at 13.5. He has been great for them. Yes, he's not a superstar or even that high of a star, but he just finds the right spaces for McDavid to find him. That is a very valuable trait in the NHL, to be a complementary piece to a superstar. So I think in terms of 21st century, the most goals with that 15 mark, I could easily see him hitting that. 19 is going to be a little bit harder when he's not playing the LA Kings, when the power play isn't 8 out of 17 like it is right now. Once they play more defensively sound teams, better penalty kills, which I thought the LA Kings penalty kill would be better than this. But I think he is going to slow down a little bit, but it has been a fantastic start. Next up, from Muhammad. Georgiev shits the bed and the Jets win in 7. Now, Georgiev obviously shat the bed in that first game, but he's looked pretty solid the last 3 games. And I'm going to be honest, even if he was playing pretty bad the last 3 games, Colorado probably wins all 3 of those games. He doesn't even have to play that good. I said literally like 880 save percentage probably wins this series for the Winnipeg Jets. Even 850, they could probably get 1 of the next 3 games. So I don't really see it happening. Colorado has been putting up I think game 2 was 5 expected goals. Game 3 was 4.5. Game 4 was 5.5. They have been absolutely exposing this Winnipeg Jets defense. It's not even that much on Connor Hellebuck. So as long as Georgiev doesn't put up a -3 goals saved above expected in a game, I think they're going to take care of it. And if it was 2-1, I maybe understand what you're saying, but Georgiev's gonna maybe have 1 stinker here in game 5, but as long as he allows less than 4 or less goals at this point with the way that the Avalanche's offense is cooking, I think they're going to lock it up. Next up, are the Canucks destined? A lot of Canucks talking this. I wanted to throw this one in here. Canucks vibe-wise, they might be up there in terms of overall vibes with these comebacks in game 1, in game 4. That's team of destiny shit. I tweeted it out when in game 1 that happened. The vibes are high. I could maybe see the Canucks go on a deep run just because off the vibes, how they're looking right now. That's a stupid answer, stupid question, but no stupid questions. What am I saying? Next up, Pavelski. Pavelski looks washed from Logan McInnes. I agree. Pavelski has not been the same player for the back half of the season, and as a result, he got demoted to that third line. Wyatt Johnston got the bump, which I 1000% agree with. Pavelski, yeah, I think he lost a step. I think he definitely lost a step. Still a very high IQ player, knows what to do with the puck, but he just doesn't move the same, and he can't keep up with the Jason Robertson and Rupe Hintz, so he gets the bump down. I think going forward, if I'm Dallas, I definitely want to re-sign him below $4 million, but if he wants somewhat of a payday, which he hasn't in recent years, I think it might be time to move off Joe Pavelski. Great veteran presence, but I think the game he was very productive in the regular season, but that was because he played with Robertson and Hintz. He just doesn't look the same, and as a result, Wyatt Johnson has made up for that and then some in terms of his progression, but it's been very surprising seeing Pavelski just not look like the same player. Next up, Tampa from Simon Blew It. Tampa are washed. They should fire sale and retool. I get what you're saying with this. If they fire sale, they could get a shit ton for Nikita Kucherov. Braden Point only makes $9.5 million like Nikita Kucherov. Get a massive haul for them. I feel like someone would take on Victor Hedman. I think he has 1 year left on his deal. Yes, definitely. He's only making $7.8 million. Vasilevsky might be a little bit hard to move, 9.5 for a goaltender, which is the second highest out of an active goaltender. But you could probably trade him. Sergachev, you could trade start of next season if he looked good. You could restart and have amazing assets in terms of that. But when looking at it, I think Tampa is just going to retool a little bit. Not even retool, but they just need to find some depth pieces. I don't think that they're so far off. They lack a lot of depth, but again, those names that I mentioned are still high level elite players. It's not like Washington Capitals or Calgary Flames where they're so far away. I still think this core and John Cooper and Julien Brisebois think that this team can contend. I think they could maybe go on like a miracle run if Vasilevsky plays fantastic. Not a miracle run, but like go on a run if Vasilevsky plays fantastic, if everything is cooking, if the power play is doing very good come next season. I don't think that they're stuck in no man's land at this point. They still have a lot of high level players, and I think they're going to be a playoff team next year. You're not going to blow that up quite yet. And I don't think if you don't blow it up next year, if you're a first round exit next year, people are still going to take Nikita Kucherov, still take Braden Point. You run it back definitely next season. They don't even have their first round. That's another thing. I forgot that for a second. They don't even have their first round pick next year. It is top 10 protected, but it's going to the Nashville Predators. So even talks about blowing it up can't happen until that 2025 offseason because you don't want to blow it up. Then Nashville either gets the pick like 11th or 12th overall, or you defer it to the next year and then you blow it up and then they have an unprotected pick. That'd be a disaster. You got to wait until 2025, 2026 to even consider that. Next up, Marner. We got 2 about Marner. Marner's playoff slander is recency biased. He has the most playoff points of the big 4. And I like this a lot. I don't think Marner, it's recency biased. I think it's more so contract bias. When looking at it, Mitch Marner is the guy that doesn't have a long-term deal and could actually be movable, and it makes sense to move him if he's willing to waive his no movement clause. I just had like a little murmur. If he's willing to move his no movement clause. When looking at William Nylander, he just signed an extension. He's going nowhere. Austin Matthews signed his extension, perfectly reasonable, 13.25. Mitch Marner, an expiring guy, contenders can make the money work in order to inherit a Mitch Marner. He is far more feasible to get traded if he's willing to do it. So I think as a result, his poor play in these playoffs, as well as the fact that we don't want to pay him. We don't want to give him this massive extension. We already paid Nylander 11.5. We already paid Matthews 13.25. We can move off Marner and actually get a decent amount of value back for him. Tavares, obviously, you're not going to trade him $11 million. You have to trade assets out the door to get rid of him. So in looking at Mitch Marner, I wouldn't say recency bias. I would say it's contract bias. But I do agree, Mitch Marner, out of all of them, I would say out of the big three, is the worst built for the playoffs. Talking about, again, those highly skilled players that can't really adapt to the physical nature of the playoffs. I think Marner, you're giving a little too much credit. He has been good defensively in the playoffs, but offense, he does kind of get pushed around. We got another Mitch Marner one. If Marner leaves Toronto, this comes from Teddy. If Marner leaves Toronto, he'll become a playoff demon somewhere else and win the cup. And yeah, I 1000% could see this. If he goes to a different team, plays on a top line with a beast two-way physical center, I could see Mitch Marner's game complementing that and actually showing up in the playoffs. That would be the funniest shit ever. If he wins the Conn Smythe, even if he goes to like an Eastern Conference final, plays, let's say 18 games and has 19 to 20 points, that would be hilarious. That would drive Toronto Maple Leafs fans absolutely crazy. I would love to see that. Evan Bouchard, this comes to us from Thomas. Evan Bouchard gets $9 to $10 million extension. Call me crazy, but I think it gets done. I agree wholeheartedly. When looking at it, the Oilers are going to have to pay up, straight up. And when you look at it, Cale Makar makes $9 million. That's what people are going to scream about, saying, Evan Bouchard's not worth that. Evan Bouchard's not worth it. McAvoy gets 9.5. Fox gets 9.5. Heiskanen gets 8.4. Quinn Hughes has a couple years left at 7.8. You got to realize that those deals were signed during the flat cap era. It's not the same comparison exactly. When looking at Evan Bouchard, if it's an 8-year deal, he's going to sign it. He kicks in when he's 25 or 26 years old. I would be more than willing to pay him $9 to $10 million. When looking at the most recent big-time defenseman contract that was signed, it's Rasmus Dahlin. He got 8 years, $11 million. I think Evan Bouchard is in the same stratosphere as Rasmus Dahlin. I don't think that that's ridiculous to say, especially considering Evan Bouchard was probably better this season than Rasmus Dahlin. Bouchard has a better team. Don't get me wrong. Do not get me wrong on that. But I think that he is in the same class. I wouldn't give him quite $11 million like Rasmus Dahlin, but I think 9 to 10 makes a lot of sense on an 8-year deal. Edmonton might have to move some pieces to make that work. I think they will be able to get off the Jack Campbell contract. Maybe not this season, but the following season, once Bouchard or Draisaitl's contract does kick in, and Campbell only has 2 years left. But I think Bouchard is looking at, with the way he's looked in the regular season and his game has, especially offensively, translated to the playoffs, I think he's looking at $9 to $10 million. Next up, surely John Cooper won't get fired from Reese, right? He's not getting fired, man. I put more blame on Julien Brisebois for what the Tampa Bay Lightning are looking like right now. And Julien Brisebois did a fantastic job. Don't get me wrong, 2 Stanley Cups. But he did go so aggressively all in the last couple of years, trading basically every single asset, that they don't have any internal depth to replace some of their guys. When they lost the fantastic third line of Coleman, Gaudreau, and Yanni Gourde, they didn't have that internal cheap growth, cheap prospects to replace those guys. And as a result, they have one of the worst bottom sixes in the entire league, besides Hedman, Sergachev, and Connor Chernak. The defense core is very weak at this point. They don't have a backup goalie. So I blame Brisebois because he rightfully so did go all in so much. It's not really on Cooper. The only reason I can see Cooper leaving is if a better job opens up and he wants to maybe get paid more. But I think John Cooper is going to stay in Tampa Bay. I don't think I'm shocking anybody with that. I can't really see that happening. And then lastly, from Logan Sutherland, there's no goalie in the league that would cause the Jets to win this series. I get what you're saying. The series is not Hellebuyck's fault entirely. 1000%. The games have been, especially games 2 through 4, have been so lopsided. I agree. It would have taken a Herculean effort to win those games. Maybe you think if Hellebuyck plays a little bit better, they're in the games come the third period, or more so in the games come the third period, and they have maybe a little bit more juice. But I do agree what you're saying, but Hellebuyck's performance still shouldn't be forgiven. It's still disappointing. Both can be true. The Winnipeg Jets defense core has let Hellebuyck down massively, but also the fact that Hellebuyck hasn't been that good. He's seeing a large volume of shots, but right now I think he ranks last in the entire NHL in playoff goals saved above expected. It has been a relatively disappointing showing from Connor Hellebuyck. Not his fault, not entirely his fault, because the defense has been so goddamn bad. probably do agree with you saying maybe Igor Shesterkin, Bobrovsky, Vasilevsky hasn't looked that good, but maybe Shesterkin or Swayman or someone like that, maybe they would have stole one of those games, but Winnipeg got basically no goal help. So I get what you're saying. I probably agree, but Hellebuck does deserve some of the blame for what has happened and why they look like they have absolutely no shot. But let me know in the comments, what do you think about these hot takes? Drop some of your hot takes below, and I will be seeing you in the next one.